Well, hello. It's funny that you see it and I do not, Alex.
At the top of the screen.
Yes, I see live up there, but I do not see it on the icon corner.
Yep.
There we are.
What's good, everybody? Welcome to the Icon Corner.
Here.
This is a
All
test.
Is it working on your end? Do you see it on?
I saw it on YouTube.
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
We are live on YouTube right now.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
live on YouTube.
Well, all right, everybody. Welcome to the Icon Corner. We have two very special guests with us today. We have Alex Soren of the Alex Soren channel. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks for having me.
And we also have another special guest, Father Juvenile Hale. We kind of share a special bond here. He is also a former Church of Christ preacher and now an Orthodox priest. Welcome, Father.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
All right, this is our first ever episode. We've had a few technical difficulties, but we are here and we are making it work. All right, so tonight we're just going to kind of hang out. We're going to take some questions, hopefully, if there are any people in the chat, especially those who are still in the Churches of Christ. If you would like to put some questions or anything you want in the comment section, maybe we'll take some call-ins later on. Especially if you're still in the Churches of Christ. We would definitely love to hear what you have to say.
I'm about to share it on Twitter.
All right, perfect.
Yeah, good deal.
All right, so let's kind of get into a little bit of how we left the Churches of Christ and ended up in Orthodoxy. Father Juvenile, I know I'd love to hear your story on that.
I'll do the quick version, I hope. Honestly, I've had 20 years to build this story, and so how accurate it is compared to what actually happened may have been embellished a little bit, over the years. But I think for the most part, the details are pretty close. I grew up. I'm a third generation Church of Christer. Growing up, my grandparents converted to the Church of Christ when my dad was very, very young. Like 2 or 3, something like that. And so my dad grew up going to the Church of Christ, and then my dad became a Church of Christ preacher. And so I grew up going to the Church of Christ to the point that I really only went to the Church of Christ. I have very, very little experience of any other churches out there because that was always kind of the deal even when you're little. I'm going to spend the night with somebody or whatever. That's okay, but you're coming to the Church of Christ on Sunday, right? I mean, you can spend the night at somebody's house, but either they come with you or they drop you off on the way to wherever they're going, but you're not going to the Baptist church or the Methodist church or whatever. And so I have very, very little experience with any of those other things, any of those other churches. And so that's important for later when this story, as it takes
I relate to that comment so much.
Because I'm not going to lie. Whenever I went to college and majored in everything except what you're supposed to major in college, and I majored on things you're not supposed to major in, more like it. And I did so poorly that I lost all my scholarships and all of that kind of stuff, and decided that the military was my route. And so I joined the Army and spent 3 years in the Army, and grew up a lot, which was important in that phase. It didn't help my religious life very much, my church life, because I really didn't care that much. But not long after I got out, I moved back to Texas, and I had a bunch of things happen at once. One, I had grown up, and I woke up one morning and just, one like Saturday morning or Sunday morning, and thought, this life I'm living's not really cutting it. This isn't the life that I want to live. Maybe my parents weren't so dumb. Maybe they had something going on. And so I started going to church. And about that time, I met a young lady that's now my wife, and she was very devout, Church of Christ. Her parents also, her mother's family was for generations, Church of Christ. Her father converted to the Church of Christ to marry her mother because she wouldn't do it without that. And so very devout family. So anyway, I grew up, I met my wife and all that. And I had gone back to college and I was going to coach and teach football. Coach football and teach math or something like that. And I found out that after being out of college for 4 years, if you don't keep up with all those math formulas, you don't remember them. And I was so far behind in math that just wasn't going to happen. So I ended up changing my major to English, really without ever any intention of ever doing English stuff. I didn't really care anything about the English, but it was there. And I was just going to coach was what I really wanted to do. And I thought teaching English might be, because all my coaches taught history, I thought English might be a better option. And after I met my wife, she had a big impact on me. And I thought, you know what I could do? I could be a preacher. If I'm going to go to church anyway, I don't want to sit here and be quiet for 2 hours. I talk too much anyway. I want to be the guy that talks. And so I decided I dropped the whole coaching thing and decided that I was pretty close to finishing my English degree. Again, never intending on really ever using the English part. I was just getting to get a degree because I thought that will open up for me in the future if I want to go to Abilene Christian or Harding or somewhere like that and get a theology degree. I'll have my bachelor's degree where I can go do that. And but life gets in the way and you kind of need a job at some point. And so with my dad's advice, because it's the route he had done, I enrolled in the Sunset, was always known as the Sunset School of Preaching. But then about the time that I went there, they changed the name to the Sunset International Bible Institute in Lubbock, Texas. My dad graduated from there. My brother later graduated from there. And it's a 2-year program, which is like similar to yours that you did. And so I went and was going to do that because I thought 2 years, boom, get out, get a job, and then I can start taking classes or something and work on a degree, which didn't happen. But I got the job. I finished that school and got a job. While I was there, we met a lot of people that I'm still friends with. That one family in particular, we were really good friends with, and we always wanted to do ministry together. And I don't know how Memphis was, but Sunset is very, very foreign missions minded. They really focus on going overseas and things like that to serve as missionaries. And we got that bug really bad, and no doors would open. And so I graduated. We tried finding foreign fields to go work in, nothing. And but I got jobs preaching. And the first job was a little dying church, and I mean dying as in it's not going to be too long until they shut the doors. Because all the people are going to be dead because they're old. And there's no young people there. And I think they thought hiring a young guy to come in and preach might help, but it really didn't. And we butted heads all the time. And I thought, man, this ain't for me. I'm not good at this. And so I quit and got another job and was teaching and stuff like that. For one semester, I was teaching in a prison. I got attacked by a student. I mentioned I was in the Army, right? One of the things
you did. It's funny because Sunset is mission focused. Memphis is definitely not mission focused. It is completely the opposite.
Yeah, Travis, wow. I just wanted to let you know you do have 2 streams going on your channel. If you want to
okay.
One of them, we can send everyone to the other one.
All right.
All right. Funny is like Travis was trying to figure out Riverside, and he couldn't get one live stream going. Now he's got 2. In fact,
got 2. Now we got 2. Yeah. That makes it impressive. I mean, I still hear my back echo, but I don't know if everybody else does or not.
Yeah. What's up, cool dude? What's up, Vigo, Koki,
Fun stuff. I have
Octavian?
no idea how to stop the second one.
Scared, drop one, you drop both.
If I stop one, I'll drop them both. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll
Interesting.
pick up and finish. I'll try to speed it up if you want me to. But anyway, we I ended up going back because I did get attacked by a student, and but one of the things I did was train West Point cadets in hand-to-hand combat, and so it really wasn't. I mean, he got a good lick on me, and so I don't act like it was this one-sided thing or anything. But I got him on the ground pretty quick and held him down, and got home that day. My shirt's all ripped up, and my back was bleeding where he had rubbed me up against a wall and stuff. And so my wife was like, "Well, guess what, buddy? It's new job time, you know." And so I ended up going back to preaching, and I actually liked that. The second church I worked with, it worked really well, but I did want to do foreign missions really bad. And so ended up the family that I had gotten that we were really close friends with, we ended up in Estonia, of all places, in Eastern Europe, borders Russia and Latvia, right across the Baltic Sea from Finland, up there. And beautiful country, beautiful place. We really enjoyed living there quite a bit. We were there 3.5 years. But while we were there, we became we went to language school to learn how to speak Estonian, and the owner of the school came in about the third week, because I'm not going to lie, nobody tries to learn Estonian from English. There's no market for that. And so we found a little language school that built a class for us to go from English to Estonian. And they actually, since we were missionaries, they actually made it religious focus. We learned church words, which was awesome, because in most languages school you wouldn't have done that. So we were learning these very, contextual terms that we need to do. But anyway, we were there about 2 or 3 weeks, and the owner came in and said that we had a student that wanted to join our class. Would we be okay with that? Come on, we're missionaries. Of course we're okay with that. We want to meet everybody we can meet. And it's this little old man, and they introduced him as Herr Reiner, Mr. Reiner. We all had fake names, like you pick your Estonian name, and so I think I was Oit was my name, and everything. And so we didn't know his real name for a long time. But one day after he'd been there 2 or 3 weeks, he gave us his card and said, "If you ever need something, let me know." And it was Metropolitan Stefanus of the Estonian Orthodox Church. All right. So we're classmates with the Metropolitan of the whole country. Now, there's two Estonian Orthodox churches. There's the one that's it's now political stuff has messed it all up. But at the time, it was one was under Moscow and one was under the Ecumenical Patriarchate. All right, this is the Ecumenical Patriarchate, and these are most of the ethnic Estonians are in this particular group. So we got to know him, and that was kind of cool. It turned out to be really useful later. But we got to know who he was. But we ended up, after a while, I mentioned before that I had never visited other churches. Well, my buddy hadn't either. And we had logistical reasons why we met on Sunday afternoons. It wasn't any deep reason. It was just practical things. But that meant for the first time in our lives, on Sunday morning, we had nowhere else to go. And we thought, let's go check these other places out. Maybe they're doing something we could learn something from, especially about reaching the culture, And so we visited a Baptist church and a Methodist church. And sometime I'll tell you about our trip to the Catholic Church, because that was actually on Easter, midnight mass. They're almost all Polish. And the bishop came, and I got the giggles in the middle of it, and he hit me with holy water a lot because so it's pretty funny, but it's not part of this story really. But we visited there. We visited a Pentecostal church. We visited the Lutheran church, which is their ethnic church that they historically Estonians are Lutheran. The fact is, like 7% of Estonians, these are 25-year-old numbers now, but at the time, 7% of Estonians were religious, period. I mean, I don't mean they were Christian. I'm talking about the Muslims, the Jews, the Christians, the people that worship trees. I don't care, whatever, 7%. And so we were just kind of doing all that. And one week it was the Orthodox Church's turn. And we went into the Orthodox Church, and most people in Estonia are understandably very standoffish to people, especially foreigners. They don't really trust foreigners very much. And it takes a long time to build relationships with them. And so when we go to these other churches, people would ignore us. And we walked in the Orthodox Church, and people came up to us, and they were Estonians, and they came up to us and they were like, "It is so good to have you here. After liturgy, we're going to have coffee hour. Would you please stay, and you can speak with a priest and have some coffee with us and a snack?" And we were like, "What happened to these people? They're acting like Christians." So we came back the next week, and we never didn't go back. We just kept going because the people just really struck us with how they loved us, even though they didn't know us, which is not very typical there. So we did that for a year, and over the year we would tackle all these issues that converts usually tackle. Like, why are they kissing those pictures? What's up with that? And we would go on this journey from, that's ridiculous, why would they do something like that, to, well, it's still kind of goofy, but I guess I understand why they do it, to, well, yeah, it's not really that goofy. I mean, I'm not going to do it, but it's not that goofy, to, I think we ought to be doing that. And we did that with vestments. We did that with icons. We did that with Mary. I mean, just like this whole, every individual issue, we went on this little path, the same path over that year, until finally my partner and I, my missionary teammate, we had convinced ourselves we should be Orthodox, but we had a couple of questions we couldn't figure out. And so we asked the Metropolitan if we could have a meeting with him, and he said, of course, And so we went and met, and we had this long talk, and he answered our questions and made us feel foolish that they were even, I mean, not he wasn't ugly to us. He was very polite and kind. He's a very kind man, but his answers were so obvious once he said them that we were like, how did I not see that? It's like I was blinded by my own hubris or something.
Sorry to interrupt, Father, but they're saying in the chat there's a slight echo. I think, Travis, if we both mute while he's talking, maybe that'll fix it.
All right, is that good? Is that better? All right, cool. All right. So anyway, we get the Metropolitan. He answers our questions for us. One of ours, and one of the big questions was, and this is coming from a Church of Christ perspective, because honestly, baptism isn't that far away from Church of Christ baptism traditionally to Orthodox baptism. There are some differences, but they're, I remember arguing with Baptists when I was younger. Well, when are you baptized? Do you have to be baptized, or are you baptized because you're saved? When does all that happen and stuff? And I think in many ways Orthodoxy has a very similar perspective to what I grew up with, or at least as I understood it growing up. There's a difference. We're going to get you 3 times, instead of the single immersion, we're going to do a triple immersion. But that's just 3 times better, right? I mean, doing that. And we'll baptize babies. And that was one that really stuck in our craw. We had a hard time with the baby thing. And so we go to the Metropolitan, and he goes, because you must be baptized to receive communion. Don't you want your children to receive Jesus? And at that point, we had accepted the Eucharist as being the body and blood of Christ. And we're like, no, I don't want my kid having Jesus. No, I don't. I mean, of course I want my kid to have Jesus. Why wouldn't I want to do that? And so anyway, he answered questions for us, and we were like, this is it. We should be Orthodox. That's what we need to do. And he goes, you Americans, slow down. Quit being in such a hurry. It's going to be okay. You just keep doing what you're doing. It'll all work out. And we did not listen. And within just a couple of months, we had sent letters back home saying we can't do this anymore. I mean, it was a hard tightrope to walk. I'm taking money from a group to evangelize for that group, and yet I don't really believe what you believe anymore. I mean, I don't want to be a hypocrite, take money from these people to do that. And so we sent stuff back home, and within 3 weeks, the other family was back in Texas. It took us about 4 months because we had other things. We had just adopted a child there. We had 3 children. Our youngest one we adopted from Estonia, and he was born there. And so we had to do all the immigration paperwork and all that kind of stuff to bring him back to do all that. What was funny was that we had spent a year studying all this stuff and going through this journey, and our wives weren't with us. This was me and my buddy, and we decided this is what we needed to do. So we thought it's time to tell the wives. And so we went and got babysitters, and we took them out to eat. And I thought, my friend started the conversation, and I thought it was beautiful. And I still think it's beautiful. It didn't get the response we wanted, but I think it's beautiful. And he said, I have spent my whole life looking for the New Testament church, and I finally found it. And we want to tell you about it because this is where you need to be. And we told them all this stuff. And our wives both looked at each other, and they looked at us and basically said, you're out of your ever loving mind. What are you doing? You know? And so that began a long process of, that was our beginning to do that. We got yanked back, and we were back in America within 3 or 4 months. And I worked as an appliance repairman for a while. And then I actually caved and found another preaching job in Virginia. We were there for a couple of years. Loved that church. Great people, great place. Loved living there. Everything about it was wonderful. It just wasn't Orthodox. And I had kind of put it on hold because I thought, I'm not going to tear up my family over this. My kids are all really young. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to, tear my marriage apart over all this stuff. We'll work this out somehow or the other. And so I kind of slow walked it for a while, and I would still do, this is before social media. This is like 2004, 5, 6 in that era. So that was back. I don't know if y'all are even old enough for this stuff. I don't know, but that was back when we did blogs. You had Day Tripper blog, your day trips on blogs. Every day you'd visit these certain blogs. And, there were several of those that I would go to every day. I didn't really do a lot with them. I mean, I might comment on posts or something like that, but not a big deal. And I didn't say a whole lot at home anymore because I didn't want to upset her. And one day I was reading one of Father Stephen Freeman's blogs. This would have been spring 2007. I don't remember what it was about, to be honest with you. But as I read it, I thought, man, my wife would really like that post, not because it's Orthodox, but because it's so Christian. It didn't really matter, who said. I just thought it was a really poignant point. And so I copied the link to that blog post and I emailed it to her. I'm going to tell you as an aside now, Father Stephen's one of her favorite people now, his writings. She loves his stuff. Anyway, I sent it to her. I forget about it. And she stews about it for like 2 weeks, just worried to death about this thing. And I've already forgotten about it. And I'm an early to bed kind of guy, early to rise. She's a night owl, and so I usually go to bed before she does. And I'd gone to bed. I woke up the next morning; she had never come to bed, and I thought, "What in the world's going on?" And so I go out in the hall and I'm looking, and that was before we all had laptops. She was sitting at our desktop computer down the hall. I could see her down that way. And she turned her head and she looked at me, and she had these tear tracks running down her face. And she said, "You're right." And I knew as soon as she said it, what she meant. And she had decided after 2 weeks that she was tired of me playing around with this Orthodox stuff, and she was going to find out what was wrong with it so she could show me, and we could get past all this stuff and move on. And over the course of that night, she agreed with me by the end of it. And so rather than crater my job again because it was pretty tough on us. We started looking for other jobs that I could do in that area, but also back home in Texas. And during the course of that year, I met a lot of people online through blogs and other things. And one of those guys, who I'm still really good friends with, helped me get a job teaching at a high school in the Houston area. And so we moved back to Houston and became catechumens. That would have been in June of 2008. We became catechumens, and we were in Houston by August, and were received in the church in Pascha of 2009. And so that's our short journey. I mean, it took us 4 or 5 years, from when I first started visiting regularly until we were finally in the church. And I hear lots of people talk about all the difficulties they had, and certainly we had our interpersonal things that we went through. God was very, very kind to us in our journey, and we haven't had family that have disowned us or anything like that. They think we're nuts, but they still love us, and we still see them at Christmas and stuff like that. So anyway, we got here. I immediately, we were talking before the live stream, that when I was a Protestant thinking about converting, I had read Father Peter Gilquist, Becoming Orthodox, and I just thought the pattern would be, well, I'm a preacher, I'll convert and become a priest. That's how this works, right? That's how the book worked. That's how this will work. And I was reading before we even became catechumens, I was reading on the priesthood, St. John Chrysostom's on the priesthood, and I thought, well, maybe I should back off on this. Maybe I shouldn't be a priest. It's not what I should do. This is like a real thing. This is not just a job. There's like actual spiritual weight on this, And so I kind of thought I would take my time on that. But then when I came in, our priest at the time encouraged me to do St. Stephen's. We're in the Antiochian Archdiocese. He encouraged me to do St. Stephen's with the eye to maybe someday being a deacon. And so I did that. He passed away at the end of my first year in St. Stephen's. We've been Orthodox for, a year, less than a year now. He was our priest for a couple of years, and he passed away. But I went ahead and finished St. Stephen's, and then by 2014, in fall of 2014, I was ordained to the diaconate. And that was really all I was ever going to do. My wife she had been a preacher's wife for all those years. And then she came to know the freedom of not being the minister's wife. And she kind of liked it. And so she told me when I became a deacon, for those that don't know, your wife, at least in the Antiochian Archdiocese, your wife has to agree. If your wife says no, I don't care what else you do, they're not going to ordain you. That's the way it works. She has to actually sign the letter saying that she approves of this. And so when she signed for me to be a deacon, she said, don't ever ask me to be a priest, because I will say no. There's no way I'll ever agree to that. And I said, fair enough. I'm happy to be a deacon. And I was a deacon for 9 years, a little over 9 years. And I don't know if y'all have heard, we have like a priest shortage. I
think we have certainly heard of that, Father. Definitely.
I think everybody knows that one.
Yeah, I think it is like a realistic concern, because.
Oh, it is. It's 100% a real concern.
Well, and like in our jurisdiction, we like a lot of the priests we get from Romania, and there's a very conscious effort in our jurisdiction to be raising up priests from here now, because we can't. We get people from the old country. I mean, people here have different problems, different upbringing, different culture, right? So it's a very conscious effort, at least in our jurisdiction.
It's. I don't want to be flippant. Any priest can do the sacraments. I mean, a priest from anywhere can come do the sacraments, and you can receive the Eucharist, and that's fine. I mean, as long as they're a canonical, ordained priest. But that's not the same thing as leading a parish in a community with certain people. And so I think that's a definitely concern. Anyway, I mean, I know that's an issue across the country. And whenever I left the Church of Christ ministry and came to Houston, I started teaching. After I did that for a short time, I got a job teaching, because I have a master's. I got a master's in English during all that. as well. I started teaching at a community college, which is where I still am. Well, I'm pretty close to being able to retire from that job. And with this shortage, I started thinking, well, you may have these small parishes can't afford a full-time priest, but they could afford an old guy that has a pension or something, I mean, I had these ideas bouncing in my head, and I don't know what's going to happen, but I knew I had promised my wife I would never ask to be a priest. And I'm a lot of things, but I'm not a liar. And so I prayed a couple of times. I didn't pray all the time. This is not like a regular prayer. I just prayed a couple of times. I said, Lord, I don't know what your plans for me are. I'm content being a deacon for the rest of my life. I'm happy. I love our parish. I love living here. And I'm happy being a deacon. I love serving this way. But if you need me, I'm not going to ask. You're going to have either have the church or my wife come tell me that I need to be a priest. That was it. I mean, it's like Gideon in the fleece, right? I mean, this is it. If you don't do this, I'm not going to ask. So it's going to have to be one of those things. And I don't know, about 3 years ago, not quite 3 years ago, but almost, our head priest called me into his office and he said, shut the door. And he goes, I've been talking to your wife and we want to put you forward as a priest. And I thought, okay, I'm stupid, but I'm not that stupid. So I laid out the fleece and God said, I'll do both sides, And so anyway, so we did that. We made I agreed to complete the MDiv through the Antiochian House of Studies and do all that. But I had done St. Stephen's and they rolled those courses over for me. And so it wasn't quite so intensive as it is for some of the guys that are starting from scratch. And so I do that. And as we were talking earlier, I'll graduate in, well, I think it's like September 3rd or 4th or something like that, whatever the graduation day is this year at the residency. But they went ahead and made me a priest then, a couple of 2.5 years ago. So I spent 9 years as a deacon and now 2.5 as a priest. And I serve. I'm not the only priest in our parish. Obviously, we have one full-time and we have two part-time. I'm one of the part-time, and we have another retired priest that's attached to us, and we all serve at the altar at various times, doing those things. But we've done mission parishes, so we have to be in more than one place, covering more than one place and stuff like that. So we keep pretty busy. And Houston's it's a pretty great place to be Orthodox in this country. We have a lot of churches here, and they're growing. Most of them are growing really well, and the priests get along. Even from multiple jurisdictions, we get along really well. And so we have several Antiochian parishes that are here. We're able to do those things. So it's a good place to be Orthodox. And I don't like to do too much because we have these people that struggle. We've got one priest covering 3 or 4 parishes and stuff like that. And that's not our struggle. We have our struggles, but they're different struggles. But that's the path from being where we were to where we are. When I listened to your videos when we first started talking to each other about why would a Church of Christ preacher convert to Orthodoxy, you had 2. I think it was your 4th and 5th videos, something like that. And I told my wife after I heard the first one, I said, wow, he did a really good job articulating those things to a Church of Christ audience. I don't know that I could do that anymore. It's been so long since I did that lingo that when I heard you say it, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that, but I don't know that it would trip off my tongue, doing it. So I thought it was very nice to hear someone saying the things that we do in a way that someone from that background would understand. And I did understand it. I don't know that I would have said it anymore. I might have 15 years ago, but which I hope that's good. I hope that my language has changed.
Well, I appreciate that, Father.
So,
you do start to lose it. Like the less you use it, the more you start to forget it.
Well, I'll tell you, it's interesting. You have a very different goal in a lot of ways. That the priest that baptized us, the one that passed away after a year and a half of us being here, he was catechizing us. We were in catechism class, and there were, I don't know, 10 or 15 people in there. And he was saying something. He goes, yeah, there's somewhere in the Bible where it says something. And I leaned over to my wife and I said, that's in Hebrews chapter 10. I think it's a verse 34, 35, something like that. Something like that. That may not be the right verse. That's, like I say, been almost 20 years ago, but it was something like that. And she goes, well, you should tell him. And I'm like, well, I don't want to embarrass him. Like some schmo from the stands knows the Bible verse that the priest doesn't. No, I'm not going to do that to him. That's cool and everything. So after it was over, I walked up because he had this old yellow legal pad that this obviously was not his first year to use that legal pad for his catechism class, with all the stains and the wrinkles and the bent pages and all the notes and all that. So I thought, I'll go up and tell him so that next year he'll have the verse, right, when he teaches it. So what if I say, hey, Father, I said, when you mentioned that verse, it was Matthew. He goes, well, why didn't you tell me? And I thought, oh, it's a different world, that I'm in. So, yeah, it was funny.
I think on when you were talking about your stages when it comes to icons, it made me think of stages of grief, but for Church of Christ, it's stages of conversion. It's like you're like, no, and then you're like, well, maybe it's not terrible, but I'm not going to do it.
Right.
And it's like, well, maybe it's not too awful. Maybe I can think about it. And then finally you get to the point where you're like, okay, this is what Christians have always done. What am I doing?
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, to be clear, we didn't start on all this hoping to become Orthodox. That wasn't our plan. We literally started visiting other churches, hoping to learn techniques that might be useful for reaching the culture that was not our native culture. That was our whole point. It really wasn't a religious, theological thing. We just noticed that when we visited that Orthodox church in Tallinn, Estonia, those Estonian people acted differently than all the other Estonian people we knew. And we thought something's happening here that's not happening everywhere else. Now, I don't know what it is, but I want to know what it is, because these people act like Christians. And I mean, they act better than we did. I mean, it was fantastic, and so that just started us on this journey that we went on. And so we had to wonder, like, why do they do that? Why are they, whatever. I mean, how come Metropolitan Stephanus sits up in that chair? Why is he over there? Why isn't he doing anything during this service? Shouldn't he be in charge? What and all that. And it is funny because as the liturgy is so structured. It's the same thing, right? It's like you do this and then this and then this, and the priest stands here. And I don't know if you've ever looked at the books, but if you look at the liturgical books, like our Liturgicon, it will give you directions. And the deacon stands at the southwest corner, and I mean, literally tells you where you're supposed to stand and what you're supposed to do and all of these kinds of things. And so even not knowing that, you see that there's this very, very tight structure to what's taking place. And yet, even with that tight structure, I watched a priest one day. He's standing in front of the holy table. And this is not my first liturgy. I've watched him do this many times. I know he's going to be there for a few more minutes, and then he's going to pick up the gospel and turn around and do something like that. And all of a sudden, he just walks off. And I thought, what in the world's going on? That's not the right thing to do. And I found out later, they had a little altar boy. It was his first time serving back there, and he had knocked one of the pieces of charcoal out of the censer onto the floor. So the priest walked over there to pick it up so he didn't start a fire. And then he came back over and he got in his place. And I thought, so it's structured, but it's not stupid, right? I'm not stuck with, I can deal with real problems that come up in the midst of what's going on, but I still follow the structure. It's like structure with intelligence, And so anyway, that always struck me. I always appreciated that in my journey at the beginning. It gave me some good perspective. So anyway, that's our story.
Well, I have a question for you, Father. Somebody asked me this question in the chat, so I wanted to ask you this. Did anybody from Sunset ever reach out to you after you left?
We did have a few people, and not a lot, but at the same time, when we were, again, as we were first doing this is not a social media world. we weren't quite as in. I mean, I grew up before the internet, so we were pretty connected. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, but it wasn't like today where you can just drop a line to people all over the place. I mean, you had to know who you were looking for, and you had to have somebody tell you what was going on. I mean, if you didn't have a blog or something, most people wouldn't know that you were changing, or doing something, or had divorced your wife, or any of those kinds of things. It seems to me that social media, when Facebook and MySpace and stuff like that, I guess MySpace was first, but then especially Facebook, when that kicked on, that's when everybody really started keeping up with everybody else all the time. And by then we were already a couple of years into our move before that became a big deal. But I did have a few people that have reached out, and they weren't ugly to me or anything like that. And I pretty much just told them, I'm not going to debate this stuff. I'm not going to argue with you. I mean, because they weren't coming saying, what's going on? Hey, is there something we could learn? It was more of we're trying to bring back our wayward brother. And, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to have that conversation. So I didn't. And my brother, one time, I mentioned he went there. One time there was something that I said. I mean, we were just talking on the phone. And I said something. He goes, well, where's that in the Bible? And I said, I don't know. You should go look for it. I'm not going to argue with you. I mean, I'm not here for gotcha stuff and all that. I don't want to do that. I'm trying to live my life. I'm trying to learn how to pray. I'm trying to learn how to be like Jesus. I'm not going to, I'm happy to answer good faith questions, but I'm not going to get into a debate about something that isn't really. I think they're good intentions. I'm not saying they don't have good intentions, but it's not going to have a productive outcome no matter what happens in that conversation. So I didn't. But I mean, I had a couple that reached out, but it was never anything to in your face or anything like that.
Well, we got a couple of questions here. I thought we could throw them up on the screen and maybe get some conversation around them. So I can pull one of them up here. Can we talk about the transition from sola scriptura to embracing the church fathers and church traditions? How did you change that mindset, and how do you explain it to others?
I guess I'll go first with the short answer, and then Father can come with the real substantive answer after that. But for me, it was like for me, it was just like, all I want to do is understand the Bible really well. And the Bible was written in Greek. It was in a Greek, like a Hellenized Jewish context. And even though we have a lot of academics today that excel in ancient languages and understand it really well, they're still not going to understand it. How somebody who was living in that context, who spoke the language interpersonally on a daily basis, who read in that language, who was educated in that language and in that cultural milieu, nobody today will be able to understand the text as well as somebody from that time. So we have like mountains and mountains of commentaries, opinions, of traditions that have been received by the church to a certain degrees. We hold the writings of the saints, obviously, in higher esteem than somebody like Tertullian or Origen, who like apostatized from the faith or was just an outright condemned heretic. Like they're useful historical witnesses, but really I just went to Saint Ignatius and I was like, look, this guy has unimpeachable pedigree, right? Direct line to the Apostle John. You have the Apostle John, and Saint Ignatius, right? Or Saint Irenaeus, where you have the Apostle John, Saint Polycarp, Saint Irenaeus, right? Unimpeachable credentials. And you listen to what they have to say, and that's not Protestantism. That's not Restorationism. It's not Pentecostalism. It's not your independent tulip-styled Bible church. It's not that. They believe in bishops. They believe in church structure. They believe that the church is a pillar and ground of truth, as St. Paul says. And they don't act the way Protestants do. They act the way Orthodox Christians do. You can see that from the external structures. You can see that from what they believe. There was a phrase from St. Ignatius that shook me up so bad, where he said, like, look, of course, schisms are bad. Even if you follow someone who causes a schism, it's basically a one-way ticket to hell. That's what he said in fewer words, right? But yeah, that's kind of how I went from Sola Scriptura to the Church Fathers. It was just I wanted to understand the Bible better from people at the time who had pedigree and a connection to the apostles. So, in fact, it was because I wanted to be more into the Scriptura that I abandoned Sola Scriptura. Yeah, Father.
Yeah, I would, those are all things that we did as well. I mean, I think St. Paul even refers to St. Clement in his letters. And guess what? We have letters from him and we have letters to him. And you can read those and it doesn't really read like what we do. I mean, you can rig your definition of things and you can make it sound like, well, yeah, that's what we do. And the president reads from the whatever, Justin Martyr's, describing the liturgy, and I guess you could say, oh yes, we do that, because the fact is that even the Protestants have liturgies; they just don't realize they do. I know our Church of Christ that I grew up in, we had 3 songs and a prayer, and then 2 songs and a sermon. We were
that's the biblical model.
I mean, we were the after the sermon communion people, not the before the sermon communion people most of the time. But I mean, you had a liturgy that you followed is the same thing every time. And geez, even some of the prayers were the same prayers because we used to mouth the prayers that the old men would say because they said the same prayer every time, And so it didn't take me long to realize that liturgy really wasn't a problem. And whenever I read in Acts that it was while they were liturgizing that Paul and Barnabas were set aside to be sent on their missionary journey, and they were liturgizing, which most of our English versions don't say that, but they're there. Or in in the first chapter where Peter says we have to replace Judas, we have someone to take over his bishopric, which became Matthias. And these words that I hadn't had to struggle with because we had just kind of glossed over them, or in the translations they weren't there. But the big question for me that led me back to Sola Scriptura was, one, who's interpreting it? Because ultimately, somebody has to tell me what some of this stuff means. Because we can act like it's all self-explanatory, but if that's true, we wouldn't have 8 billion different denominations out there. We would have one because it's self-explanatory. So it's obviously there's some things that are easy to misunderstand. And I think it's the height of hubris to think I'm the one that figured it all out when everybody else has blown it in their interpretation. And luckily, Scripture tells us how to do that, right? Was it 1 Timothy 3:15? The church is the pillar and support of the truth. And Peter in his epistles talk about how that prophecy is not for anyone's individual interpretation, but it's given. Paul says, don't do prophecies if there's not someone there to interpret it that's appropriate to do so. I mean, we have, some guidance there. And when I realized that the church has to be the one that interprets it, I realized the church is the one that actually put it together. I mean, what did they do whenever Justin Martyr or Irenaeus or whoever, they didn't say, well, let me whip it out and see what it says over in 2 Peter. They didn't do that because they didn't have this book that everyone could read and look stuff up in. And to be honest, even if they had the book around, they probably couldn't read it. I mean, most of the peasants probably couldn't. I mean, there was always people there that could, but many people couldn't. That's one of the reasons icons are so important, right? Is they're able to teach with icons, and we hear the scriptures being read during the lectionary readings in church. Plus, our whole services, the liturgy or vespers or matins or the hours or whatever, are nothing but full of scripture. I mean, if you read the Psalms, go to an Orthodox. If you don't read the Psalms very often now, go to an Orthodox church for a year, and then go back and read the Psalms and tell me how many of those Psalms you already know by heart, or at least verses from the Psalms by heart, because they're part of the liturgy or the Great Vespers or something like that. I mean, it's just full of scripture. But for those 300 years, what was the authority for those 300 years? I realized that these letters were floating around and the gospels were floating around, but so were a lot of other things. Who decided which ones go in and which ones go out? That wasn't set in stone until, the First Ecumenical Council. And so for me, the sola scriptura thing kind of broke down when I looked at the history of the church and how it worked. How could you do that? How could you build it on that? Even whenever it says that there are things you saw from me in person or in a letter. So that means he was teaching stuff that he didn't write down, but he still expects them to follow. He tells Timothy, 2 Timothy 2:2, the things you learn from me in the presence of many witnesses, go and do likewise, teaching others also. I mean, you saw me do it, you go do that. I mean, there's apostolic succession, by the way. So, I mean, you have all these different things that I had never really thought about, or I thought about it with very limited definitions of the terms and the context. And when you look at it in a bigger picture, you're kind of like, I just don't see it working, you know? And honestly, once I realized that I had to rely on the church to interpret scripture or anything else, really, uh, most of the other stuff got pretty easy because even if I didn't understand it, I would say, well, I'm limited. Maybe this is one of my blind spots, but the church says this, and I trust the church is going to tell me the right thing. Maybe not any individual, not any individual bishop or priest or even saint. They may be off on something, but the church as a whole. I mean, as an example of that, you think about in uh, Saint Mark of Ephesus. He's the guy, right? All these other hierarchs, yeah, we're going to join with Rome. We're going to join with Rome. And the guy says, no, we're not. And they punish him and they abuse him and all that. And they sign all these things. And the church said, no, we're not going to do that, guys. Sorry. And so even though the bishops said we're going to do something, the church as a whole did not do that. Because the church is led by the Spirit, and the church is going to interpret what's there. I can't rely on my own interpretation, but if sola scriptura is true, I have to rely on my own interpretation because you might be wrong. So anyway, that's the journey that I went on with.
Yeah, I think those are all really good points, especially the formation of the canon that really kind of shifted it for me. Because I think Journey of Abundance in the chat made a good point. Like, Jay Dyer destroyed Sola Scriptura for me. I mean, yeah, he shows that it like doesn't work within the system, right? So, of course, there's the McDonald book. You guys all know the Lee McDonald book on the formation of the canon, the F.F. Bruce book on the formation of the canon. But if you don't want to spend all the time reading those or dishing out the money for 2 books, there's a very small book by Father Stephen DeYoung called The Whole Counsel of God, an Introduction to Your Bible. And one of the facts in this book that really stuck out to me that was that out of all of the early manuscripts that we have, almost half of them are lectionaries. Are any Protestants using lectionaries? Mostly no. Mostly no.
Well, I would point out with that, it's through the lectionaries that most people heard the Gospels. Most people in those first centuries did probably few of them heard Matthew chapter 1:1, and all the way through 28:20 in order. They heard the readings at the services each week. And in fact, I don't know if people do all these studies if they haven't done them, but when you start thinking about these Greek editions of the New Testament, they update those, right? The ones that we use today aren't the ones they were using 100 years ago. They're updated because, man, they find new manuscripts, they find better translations, and whatever the different things it could be, that they adapt those things because it's hard to find the whole thing laid out from end to end in order. What they
Yes.
find a lot are lectionary readings that they have to put together to create the whole thing. So, yeah, lectionary readings obviously are a big part of the scripture being put together, and that was found in the church. So,
Yeah, and
there
there's
were a
one.
couple. There were a couple verses that really bothered me. Acts 20:35 really got me going because Paul quotes Jesus and he says, "As the Lord has said, it's better to give than receive." I remember going, "Where did Jesus say it's better to give than receive?" And I'm flipping through the Gospels. I'm like, Jesus never said it's better to give than receive. So where's Paul getting that? And then I started thinking, okay, so Paul is here. If Paul doesn't quote this, right? If Paul doesn't say, as the Lord said, it's better to give than receive, then I would be sitting here right now going, well, there's no evidence Jesus actually said that. So I would be arguing against a teaching that Jesus himself gave. And the only reason I know it exists is because Paul, 20 years later, quotes it. And I was thinking, okay, so with the way we've interpreted scripture, we would essentially say we can't really trust if Jesus said that or not, since no one ever quoted him. So either it wasn't valid for 20 years. It wasn't real for 20 years until
Right.
Paul wrote it.
Well, and I would want to know where Paul got that from. I mean, obviously somebody told him, because I mean, I don't know that we. I mean, I know people speculate, did he ever actually see Jesus and do things, or maybe he did. But did he hear Jesus say this, or did Peter tell him this? Did Barnabas tell him? I don't know where he got this from, and so yeah, this nice little oral tradition going there, passing it down.
Yeah. One more quick, I think, useful fact for you guys in the chat. If you look up this thing, it's called the stichometry of Nikephoros, who is Saint Nikephoros of Constantinople. Here, I'll actually copy paste it in the chat because the spelling is a little tricky. But anyway, he has a list of like New Testament disputed books in the Old Testament, and he is writing in the early 800s. And he has in his disputed New Testament books Revelation of John, the Apocalypse of Peter, the Epistle of Barnabas, the Gospel of the Hebrews. In his disputed Old Testament text, he has Judith, Esther, Tobit, certain songs, and the Psalms of Solomon, Wisdom, Sirach, the 3 books of Maccabees. He also has a separate list of books that he suggests for private reading, which includes books like Enoch, and there's a few other ones too, actually. Father Stephen writes about it in this book. But look, the canon is a complicated thing. This is not something that was sorted overnight. It didn't fall down from the heavens. God uses people to come to these decisions. He works through his church, which is his body.
In 1 Corinthians 5, I want to throw this one out there because this one really got me going. When Paul writes, in my first letter, I wrote to you not to keep company with fornicators. And this is 1 Corinthians. And so I was sitting there going, wait a minute, there's a whole letter that we don't have that Paul wrote to Corinth and gave them inspired teaching that they were to keep, even though it's not a letter that's in the Bible. So there is a whole letter out there we don't have. But I was thinking there is right there evidence that just because it's not in the scriptures doesn't mean Paul is saying, well, you know what? That letter wasn't in the scriptures, so you can keep company with fornicators. Not a big deal.
Yeah, a few more books, because I know you guys were saying like Jubilees in the chat. Jubilees is not included, but the Testaments of the 12 Patriarchs, the Prayer of Joseph, the Testament of Moses, the Assumption of Moses, these are all books that Saint Nikephoros recommends for private reading. So what was interesting that I learned recently is that, of course, when I go into Orthodoxy, wow, there's so many sources of theology, so many things I can learn from. Before when I was Protestant, it was just the Bible. Now it's the Bible, the Deuterocanon, the councils, the Holy Fathers, the icons. Like there's so many places to get theology from. Recently, I learned that this Second Temple literature was preserved by none other than the Byzantines. We have 2 sources for manuscripts for the Second Temple literature, and it's Qumran, it's the caves, and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and us, the Orthodox Church. We're the ones that preserved all this stuff. So like there's so many sources of theology, and the Christian tradition and Christian heritage is like rich. It's not poor with just like a bare minimum where like God is not going to leave you by yourself. Like even if you take a sola scriptura view, I think all the prophecies of the church, and Father, I think you probably have something to say about this. Like all the prophecies of the church in the Old Testament discount the sola scriptura view. Like I know Travis, you brought up Daniel 2:44 when I was prepping my debate with Aaron that the church is going to be established in the time of these kings. It will last forever. It will never be replaced by another. And in Isaiah chapter 1, Isaiah is prophesying about the church, at least according to Saint Jerome. He sees Isaiah chapter 1 this way, and he says that your judges will be restored as at first. That means you're going to have some bishops and some people that are going to be making judgment calls on what the text means and what it means for you. So I think just like the prophecies about the church and what kind of entity it's going to be, this theandric body, it really discounts any sort of sola scriptura view. But that was a lot on sola scriptura.
Well, I think something Father said earlier where he was talking about it comes back to your interpretation. It really made me think of St. Vincent of Lorenz, the Combinatorium. My favorite. It is probably the book that completely shifted the way that I think, because we had Cine, we were taught command, example, necessary, inference, and it always goes back to, like, we could talk about the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. Well, you would have one half of the churches of Christ, well, he indwells through the word alone. And then you had another half of the churches of Christ, and they would say, well, no, actually, he really does indwell you. And then there's no way to kind of solve that issue between the two groups. And so we go, well, is there a command? Well, you can't command the Holy Spirit to indwell, so there's not that. And then there's the example, and they go, well, those are all miraculous indwellings. None of those work. And then they kind of just keep going down through, and they go, okay, well, there's kind of these teachings, and we're all drawing a necessary inference from what we're reading. Well, then it's just really my interpretation versus your interpretation at that point.
Right.
And then if you get
Well,
to when I picked
go ahead.
this up for the first time, and he said, is it ancient? Is it believed everywhere and by all? And I said, that is a much clearer, easier to parse out hermeneutic than is my necessary inference better than your necessary inference?
I think that one of the things we struggle with in the West, this is not a Church of Christ only issue, but in the West in general, is we have a very legalistic viewpoint of how we interpret and understand Scripture. And, whenever you find something that's an exception to the rule, it can really mess up your legalistic stuff, because then somebody takes that and runs in a whole different direction because they have an example. I mean, I grew up with a command, example, necessary, inference. I got it, But so what do you do whenever you're baptized and you receive the Holy Spirit, and then you hit Cornelius and the Holy Spirit fell on them? And then Peter says, well, if they're going to get the Spirit like we did, so it's exactly like they did, I guess we should go ahead and baptize them. So now it's out of order. And so you have to explain that if you have that Western perspective on it, where it has to have this command, example, or whatever, because that's an exception to the rule, it seems like. So how does that fit? Is that fair? I mean, how come he can get the Holy Spirit without getting baptized and others can't? Or as I've heard you mention before in other places, the thief on the cross, I guess we can do baptism in blood. I don't know. I mean, but whatever, there's you don't get those are exceptions to the normal rule. And it's like, well, who gets to decide when we can have exceptions and when we can't have exceptions? And who has the authority to decide that it's okay to do an exception? If they could do exceptions then, why can't we do exceptions now? And that's hard to pull off when you have a very strict perspective on it all. And so I think it is nice to have, is this what's been believed everywhere by everyone? Then yeah, guess what? Congratulations, you're in the Orthodox Church, And so they've figured out where those are, or they've put people in positions to make those decisions, and those people that make those decisions carry the weight of making those decisions. And so it's a good thing. Yeah, St. Vincent.
We have a question here. Where was the Orthodox Church during the Reformation?
Yo, it would Orthodox. That's my horrible Jesse Lee Peterson impression. But we were doing Orthodox things, and in fact, the Lutherans were asking to join us, and we didn't let them. So we were just doing the same thing that we've always been doing. Being Orthodox, worshiping God in the liturgy, producing saints, the Jesus prayer, Orthodox.
Right. I would even say, one of my favorite saints is Saint Alexander of Severe. If you don't know him, look him up and look at images. You're welcome. All right, because the images of him, his 500-year-old dead body, looked like he died last Thursday. But anyway.
I think it was found in water, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. It's he was during that time period, time of the Reformation, roughly. So
it's a good point.
As Alex said, we were making saints. Not we, but the church was making saints.
Does the COC not celebrate Christmas or Easter? I might be mixing them up with another denomination. No, the Churches of Christ do not celebrate Christmas or Easter or any holiday of any kind, really.
That, well, to clarify, at least I'm coming from the liberal side from his perspective, because he was at Memphis and they're like crazy, crazy to the right, right? They're like right above snake handlers, right? So that's a joke, but uh, you don't celebrate those things as a church. You can do those things at home individually on your own. And so you can, I mean, most people I knew had Christmas trees and presents and stuff like that, but we probably did not have anything special for Nativity or an Easter. I remember people wearing nicer dresses and stuff like that. And you might have some people that came to church that normally didn't come to church, but it was really just Sunday. I mean, I don't remember it being a big deal. Well, we're going to do eggs later. You know, that was about it. Plastic ones.
I remember one of my last few years preaching. I was at a congregation, and they were very big on we don't celebrate religious holidays. We don't do it. And then I showed up to church the Sunday before Christmas, and there were red poinsettias everywhere. They were all over the windows. They were up on the stage. They were up on the podium. They were at the back. There were wreaths on the door, and I was like, "We don't celebrate Christmas, huh?" Like it looks like we're inside of a Christmas tree. There's just Christmas stuff everywhere. What is happening? So yeah, so there's definitely on the conservative side, that would have been considered even terrible. Even having the poinsettias up because it looks like Christmas.
Right.
Father Juvenile might remember avoiding the very appearance of evil.
Oh, of course, yeah. Well, I'll tell you, kind of related to that. It's not for the holiday, but I did a sermon series at one time that was on great people in the Bible, and so I do Gideon and Joshua and so on, and I debated a long time about whether or not I should do a sermon about Mary, the Theotokos. Should I talk about the Virgin Mary? And then I thought, what a dumb thing to worry about. I mean, it's okay to talk about Gideon and Moses and Sarah, or what. I could talk about these people. I could talk about Peter and Paul and whatever, but don't preach about Mary. That one person in all of history that God said, "Hey, I'm going to come and indwell you and conceive a child in your womb." Let's don't talk about her. And it was actually because of fear of because of the way the Reformation, and even though the Church of Christ doesn't want to admit it, they're very influenced by that they so anti-Roman Catholic that you can't talk about Mary. You can talk about everybody else, but you can't talk about Mary. And I worried about that. I went ahead and did the sermon, and I thought, well, if they fire me, they fire me. And they didn't. It was fine. It was okay. So that's how we knew things were getting looser and lighter in the Church of Christ world, because I was able to preach about Mary with no blowback. So
I remember the first time I preached on Mary. It was a Mother's Day sermon. I was like, "This is how I can talk about Mary without people getting mad." So I'm going to talk about Mary being the mother of our Lord for Mother's Day, and then kind of apply that out. And I remember there was a little old lady at the congregation. She was in her 80s, and she came up to me afterwards. She goes, "Can I talk to you for a second?" I said, "Sure." We go to the back, and she goes, "I've been a member of the church my whole life, and that is the first time I have ever heard a sermon about Mary." So 80 years in the churches of Christ and had never heard a sermon about the mother of our Lord. So I definitely understand what you mean there, Father, when you talk about the danger of speaking about things that should not be dangerous to speak about. Here is one. The Churches of Christ spread conspiracy theories that Constantine created the Catholic Church and made them worship dead peoples and idols. All right. So when it comes to the churches of Christ, Nicaea and Constantine are the catch-alls for everything bad. So if there is a false doctrine, it probably originated at Nicaea. If there is something heretical that happened, it was probably because Constantine started it. That's pretty much what happens. Anytime church history gets brought up, Constantine is bad, Nicaea is the worst.
Right. Yeah, that's the whole deal. That's the book, right? The church, the falling away, and the restoration. And the falling away, 325. I mean, it kind of started as soon as John died, as they put the last dirt over his, body. And so the last apostle is no longer alive. We're downward trajectory, and it culminates at by 325. Everything's just gone to pot. And, there were probably people hiding in a cave somewhere that were worshiping properly, but we don't know about them. Other than they were there, we know it in our heart. They were there, and then till the 1800s, then we restored it.
That reminds me of something Father Barnabas said. Father Barnabas Powell, when I was watching his journey to fullness, and he said, surely the true church was hiding in a cave somewhere singing "I'll Fly Away."
Honestly, that song is a banger. Like the Gaither vocal band. Slaps.
But did they have crackers and grape juice? That's what I want to know.
As long as it's Welch's.
Yes, it had to be Welch's. Yeah.
Welch's wasn't around yet.
I learned recently that Welch's was specifically made for like Protestant or Baptist churches to replace communion wine, which I don't know if I should respect Welch's more for that, for like seeing a market and going for just ruthlessly going for it, or for taking the wine out of their symbolic communion anyway, right? I'm like so torn about this.
The one drink drunk crowd goes to very extremes to deny that Jesus had wine at the Last Supper, or that the wedding feast was wine. In fact, I heard someone the other day in a message they sent to me about it said that the way they kept alcohol, or the way they kept grape juice from fermenting, was they put sugar in it. And I remember thinking, you don't understand the fermentation process, because sugar feeds and creates alcohol and makes it stronger. What are you talking about? That's the opposite.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. For those that don't know, the Church of Christ would be officially a very teetotaling group. That's if you're going to drink, go out of state.
Yeah.
Don't do it here.
To the question though about Constantine, you see all those things that they complain about in the Second Temple period. Like if you go to, it's just because it's at the forefront of my mind right now, but the Book of Enoch, chapter 9, you see like very clearly intercession, like people praying to the archangels in heaven to intercede for them, crying out to divine council members, which again you see in like Job 5. And throughout Job, I have a video on this. You can see it. It's like, if Christ was on the cross, praying, why on earth did the onlookers think that he was crying out to Elijah? That doesn't make any sense unless that would have been a practice at the time. Also, it was Rachel weeping for her children in the Gospel of Matthew with the slaughter of the innocents by Herod is like universally understood to be in intercessory prayer by Rachel for the children. But like all of these ideas are already there in the Second Temple tradition. These are not some like pagan innovation. That's like I'm not trying to be mean about it, but it is like a very low tier polemic. Like any basic review of the literature on this, you'll see like just look into anything on Jewish studies. You'll find that this is like a long entrenched practice. This is not a pagan accretion that came hundreds of years later. It was passed on from the apostles to Christ's church.
Great point. If you have any other questions in the chat, I think I've seen one. He's asked it a couple times. I'm trying to find it. Here we go. What advice can y'all give me for breaking the news to my spiritual father and priest that I'm ready to go to Orthodoxy? I visited Father Hale's church on Pascha.
I think this gentleman said he was ACNA also. But I mean, I just be like very respectful and deferential and tell them that like these questions that you have in your mind and be like, look, I'm in a time of my life when I'm like reevaluating my world. Of course, this is all friendly advice. I am not your spiritual father, so and I don't know all the details of your situation, but like generally, I would just be like very forthcoming. Don't try to beat around the bush. Just be polite, but be direct at the same time. Like, don't make him guess as to where you are. Be like, look, I'm going to, I'm looking towards orthodoxy, but this is more of a
Right.
pastoral
Yeah.
question, so I'll let. I mean,
Yeah.
Father, please
Well,
go ahead.
I think that's all right. Yeah. I mean, the thing is you don't want to be. I mean, this is not a time for debate and argument, or this is why I hate this church that I've been in and I'm leaving. I mean, I don't know. Different people go through different phases when they leave one group for another. And not everybody has the same experience, and so there's no way I could say, "Hey, my experience was this, so you're going to do that." I don't. I don't know. I did go through a phase where I was like, "Ah, can't believe I used to believe that. That's so dumb." Yeah, I mean, like, and now I look back and I'm like, God, they taught me so many good things. I learned so much good stuff in the Church of Christ. It's been a blessing in my life. It's wonderful. And I don't think they have the fullness of the truth. And I think there's some things that they're wrong, but that doesn't mean I want to throw everything out and hate on it or anything like that. And so I think we have to be careful with that if that's a tendency that you have, but you may not, because some people don't have that experience. I would just very clearly say I've visited a few times. I think I need to pursue this path. And if this is where God leads me, this is where I'll go. I mean, you can do it that way. Tell people I appreciate everything that you've done for me. I love you. I hope that everything is good for you and all that. But I really need to pursue this path. And if it's God's will, I end up back here someday. I'll be back here. But I think this is where He wants me to go. And then it's a there's no easy letdown, but to me would be about as easy of a letdown as you could have.
Yeah, and there was something you touched on there, Father, that I think is like really important, and it's just meditating on what was good about your prior tradition. Like, I try to do this all the time. Like Pentecostals, are they a little wild in seeking, spiritual experiences? A little bit, but you know what? They have a great love for the scriptures. They memorize it. They have great devotional practices of making it a point to read their Bible and to pray every single day. They seek many different ways to try to incorporate God into their life whenever they have a problem. Usually, the first place they go is they drop to their knees in prayer, and you have to focus on the good things. Like really looking back on my journey through like being a Pentecostal for most of my life, and then doing this fact finding mission, and then going to a tulipy Baptist John MacArthur Bible church for a while, and then eventually the Lord led me to Holy Orthodoxy. It really does look providential because there were things that I learned at each step of the journey that are things that I now find and appreciate, and I'm very grateful for within Holy Orthodoxy.
One of the things Father Barnabas told me early on when I first started visiting there, because you do go through a roller coaster of emotions when you find out that everything you've ever been taught, it's not what you thought it was. And he pulled me aside and he said, I don't want you to hate the churches of Christ. Just remember they are the people who taught you about Jesus. You are muted, Alex. We can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry, my bad. I didn't mean to project this on the screen right away here. I thought you'd have to like approve it or something. I'm not used to Riverside. But anyway, this has to do with the last question. This is the book of Enoch, chapter 9, about like intercession to the saints. I just thought it was like an interesting point to make here. So the passage just reads that Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Suriel, and Uriel, 5 archangels, looked down from heaven, saw the quantity of blood shed upon the earth. The earth, deprived of her children, has cried even to the gate of heaven. And now to you, holy ones of heaven, referring to the archangels, the souls of men complain, saying, obtain justice for us with the Most High. This is like identical right here to what you see in Job 5. This is from the book of parables here in Enoch, is about like 200 BC, or at the like The latest would be 100 BC. So here you have like unambiguous invocation of the members of the divine council prior to the church. Again, this is an ancient Jewish practice. This is not some pagan accretion.
All right, so we have another question right here. Uh-oh. I tell you what, these things move fast when they start going. How do we keep the ball rolling with dialogue between the Orthodox and the churches of Christ? Any strategies or upcoming plans? Just continue the conversation. I mean, really, it kind of puts preachers in a precarious position, because if they show too much interest, a lot of them are going to be putting themselves in danger with their preachers, or not with their preachers, with their elders. Father, would you say you had kind of the same experience on
Yeah,
your
I mean
side too?
that's the deal. Is you're going to have if you're a minister, and I guess we should clarify for all those other people, right? They're not pastors. That would be the elders. You know, it's a minister or a preacher or something like that in the Church of Christ. If you're a minister in the Church of Christ, or any other church, it doesn't have to be Church of Christ. It's any other church. If you're going to convert to Orthodoxy, you're giving up your career. I mean, this is how you pay your bills. This is how you support your family. And you're going to have to find something to do with that. Now, I totally understand that struggle. I've been there and done that. And there's been some lean years in the past. I mean, not that we were ever starving to death or anything like that, but there's been a lot of years that were pretty tight. And I'm not the only priest. I'm not the only priest in our parish that gave up their career in another church to become a priest or to become an Orthodox Christian, much less become a priest later. Because like I had no idea I was going to be a priest. I was just giving that up and going somewhere else, you know, and just cratering that career is what I did. And so I understand that. I think it's funny because people will come to us and they'll be like, well, I just don't know because I'd have to give up my career. I'm like, yeah, okay. I mean,
Well, the good news is there's a there's
so,
a big crown waiting for you if you give up a very lucrative career. You know, the Lord sees that.
It's a struggle. I know that, and it's hard, but I don't know. Yeah, if you trust God, you know it's going to work out. It may not work out the way you think it'll work out. It may not work out the way you want it to work out, but it'll work out. You just trust Him, and He always provides. And I've had too many unexplicable things happen to me and to other people that I know. I don't mean stories I've heard fourth hand or, you know, so I mean, literally I've either it happened to me or I saw it happen to somebody, or it's somebody that I know really close and it happened to them and they told me about it. There's just been too many times where, you know, it seems like, you know, everything's just gone. You've lost it all. You're in trouble. And at the 11th hour, God shows up and saves the day. And, you know, okay, I shouldn't say 11th hour because that's like a movie thing. Sometimes he shows up at 12:30 after everything has cratered and you think that it's over with and you've lost, and somehow he still wins it for you later. It happens, you know. I mean, sometimes it's after midnight. It's not at 11. You know, it's later, but he always will show up. He's promised he won't abandon you, and it's just sometimes his timing is not your timing. But yeah, I don't know. I understand. I sympathize very much. I think I'm not as not forgiving. That's not the right word. I'm kind of like to me that's not a reason. I mean, I did that, you know, and so to me that's not a reason to do it at all. I just can't imagine not doing it because my life is so blessed. I mean, I think I had a fine life before, but just the depth of love that I've experienced from God has been nothing like what I ever had before, and not just me, my whole family. So.
I concur, Father.
Agreed. It's not easy. It's not easy to go from, I know this is what my week is going to be like. This is what my day is going to be like. This is what my income is going to be like. This, and then next week, that's all just gone.
Yeah, for me, like my livelihood wasn't depending on it, but it was an enormous social cost, like huge social cost. Like hundreds of friends are very popular to like literally I could probably count on my hands the number of people that still keep in touch with me from that time of my life. It's enormous social cost. But you know what? If the truth matters to you, then the social cost doesn't matter so much. And look, unless you hate your mother and father, you can't really follow Christ, right? And by hate, he means love less. Calvin is getting a little excited out there.
One of the things I tried to do, and this is probably going to sound a little funny, but I would call preachers that I knew and was like, okay, this person is clearly smarter than I am. Let me call them and just beg them for a reason while I'm wrong. Like, convince me to stay. And
I did the same thing.
I was like,
I was like, guys, help me, please. I want to stay Protestant. Please help me. It's like it would be way easier in my life to stay Protestant. But yeah, I took that same approach, Travis.
It's like anything, just give me something to hold on to here. Like this is gonna ruin everything that I've planned for my future.
Yeah, basically turned into Alex is changing the Bible, Nathaniel. Yeah. I think that that normative authority critique is so devastating. And like I've recommended the article a few times on my channel by Perry Robinson, the Are You Flying Solo article. That one I think is like a pretty definitive destroyer for the Sola Scriptura model, because the question is like, who gets the final say? That's the question. Who is the final court of appeals? Is it an ecumenical council? Is it the Pope? Or is it your own conscience? The Orthodox Church, it's the ecumenical council with reception. In the Roman Catholic Church, it's one guy, the Pope. In the Protestant models, like Turretin, Hodge, Luther, were very clear. This is a matter of conscience, and your conscience is the final court of appeals, which is an untenable way to have any church, let alone any worldview or philosophical system.
Yes, this is
That's funny.
I mean, that's
remember begging, please help me. And they couldn't, because there are no answers to these things, because orthodoxy is true, not Protestantism.
the closest answer I got was a fella that I respected quite a bit was just like, it's not what you think it is. And I was like, cool, I need you to tell me what that is. Well, I can't. It's just not what you think it is. And I was like, that's not an answer. I need to know what the thing is. What is the thing that I don't think that it is?
Yeah, stop telling me what it's not. Tell me what it is.
It's apophatic, right? That's the.
That's right. So apophatic sola scriptura theology.
All right. Anybody else have any questions in the chat? Yeah, I remember that quote right there, fullness of the faith. To study church history is to cease to be Protestant. So I put that on the board in Bible class when I was doing church history. And one of the members was like, wasn't that said by a Catholic? Like they were very offended that that's what I put on the board. I was like, well, you don't agree with Protestantism either, so I don't know why you're mad at it.
You teaching papist theology here, Travis. There was a question that I copy pasted from earlier just because I thought it was interesting. It says, if y'all are doing questions later, what/where are the best resources that show the Eucharist is the pinnacle of the worship service? Thanks. What are the best resources that show the Eucharist is the pinnacle of the worship service? Well, I would say the Bible, Hebrews, Revelation, the Torah, Passover, and the Williams and Anstall book on worship. And then, like I said, Hebrews and Revelation. Father?
Well, that all of those things I agree. But just to add something else, the tradition of the church says that's what it is. I mean, that's how the church has worship. That's how the divine liturgy is constructed to do that. I mean, I think that's important to remember is that we don't only have these philosophical ideals that we hold to, that we try to understand and parse out and put together, but we have this communal life that we live, and it's inside that tradition that all these things take place. And whether I understand it all fully or not, it's all part of this life that we have. And so the church has held together, and it's been something that's been pointed out by people outside the Orthodox Church complaining about the Orthodox Church, and then we take it as a compliment because they'll say, yeah, they're stuck in the 3rd century. They haven't changed. They're doing the same things they always did. And yes, that's absolutely right. We're trying hard not to change things. I mentioned that I didn't ever go pursue the graduate stuff as a Church of Christ preacher. I did take some classes. And one of the classes I took from one of the Church of Christ universities was a church history class. And this was online, and it was while I was investigating Orthodoxy. So 2004 or 5 in there. And there was an Orthodox church in the town where this university is as well. And I was going to church, and we're studying the early church. And I'm like, I'm watching this on Sunday at the Orthodox Church. What we're describing is what I'm seeing, but I wasn't making a big deal out of it. I didn't want to cause a ruckus at this Church of Christ University class. Some of the guys from the class went and visited the Orthodox Church in that town and came back and started talking about it. So then I started talking about it as well. And the professor had to actually, and he kind of was going, well, yeah, it was a lot like that actually, and stuff. And he had so many complaints from other people in the class. He had to come back and tell us all, I'm not telling you to convert to Orthodoxy. I'm just telling you what the early church looked like. And so, and I'm like, oh, I see that. And so I just think that life, that tradition that we have, the services that we do where the Eucharist is the pinnacle of our divine liturgy is the same divine liturgy that they did 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago. And I'm not saying there's not a few little minor variations that different jurisdictions might do and, a movement or something like that. But the basic structure of the divine liturgy is the divine liturgy. And it has been, St. John Chrysostom, St. Basil the Great, based upon the one from St. James, and so I don't know if you could date exactly when those things were done, but maybe you can. I don't know, but it's a long time ago.
Early, yeah.
And we haven't changed, and so it's always been that way, and so it accords with the scriptures and the Jewish practices and all that, but it's the way we've always done it, and so the church does it because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think the greatest catechism is the services of the church, absolutely, and being there. But the next best thing to being there, which you should just be there because that's where the energies are, is that there's this new catechism that came out that's based solely on the services of the Orthodox Church with some commentary by a bunch of father doctors, a bunch of very credentialed priests on there. So I've been working my way through this. I want to have maybe one of the authors on my channel at some point to discuss it. But again, you can't really replace just being in church. That's where the learning happens. It's experiential. And I think that's one of the things that drew me to Holy Orthodoxy in the first place, was that in contrast to charismatic Christianity that I grew up in, or that tulip MacArthur independent Bible church style, you have like two extremes, right? The charismatics are like only spiritual experience with no guardrails, no dogmatics, no authorities. The independent tulip guys are like just kind of an academic exercise of trying to understand what the Bible means and to work it into some system they have presupposed. And orthodoxy is just the golden road, right? It's experiential with the guardrails of the church. You have thousands, like 2,000 years of holy fathers that are guiding you in your path. And not only that, because we're not Protestants where it's sola patristica, right? You just read the fathers for yourself and come to your own conclusions. No, the church is alive today. You go to a priest today, you go to your spiritual father today, and the tradition is still inherited. Like, again, like I speak pretty regularly with my spiritual father, and we discuss a lot of these issues. Like the tradition is something inherited from someone else. It's not gleaned by your own academic. I think Father was touching on this earlier. Actually, this is not an academic exercise. This is the experience of God. It's in His church.
Right, and you know, one of my favorite modern saints is Saint Porphyrios, and here's a very uneducated man. I mean, with first grade or something like that, you know, talks about how he would, like in his Akathis, he would read haltingly the life of Saint John the Hut Dweller, right? Because he couldn't read very well, and because he just didn't have very much education. And I mean, of course, if you know his story, very young on Mount, too young, he's on Mount Athos because God led him there, and so he never gets that education. Comes back and becomes a priest at the doctor teaching institution. So he's at the clinic, you know, he's at the chapel at the university where they teach doctors, right? So these very educated people with this very uneducated priest. And it basically, he learned from Lives of the Saints, a few of those, learning the prayers of the church, the services of the church that he could do from memory and from heart because he had done them so many times that they had become a part of who he was. He could have a conversation with doctors and talk about, you know, very complex things beyond his ability that he should have been able to do. And I'm not talking about some kind of miraculous, whether it may have been, but I'm not pointing that we're all going to have some miraculous thing if we do the prayers of the church. But
you might.
you want to commune with God, and you want to know what's important. You do the services of the church. You do the prayers of the church. You read the lives of the saints, and the other stuff. You know, if you get to that, great. You know, but if you do those things, God will give you what you need. And if it needs to be that more complex stuff, He'll provide that for you. And if you don't, you just keep doing the prayers of the church and become holy. You know, that's the way you do it. So.
I think that's so wonderful about orthodoxy is that like if you want dogmatics, there's dogmatics in abundance. There's absolutely no shortage of it, you know. But it, like at the end of the day, it is about becoming a saint, becoming a holy one of God. There was a comment in the chat from Ace Koala said, "Ecclesiology and apostolic succession is my pet subject." That is something I was looking into early on. And for anyone else in the chat who wants like a recommendation or something, there's a very short essay by Father Gregory Rogers called Apostolic Succession. This is an excellent primer and just like overall work. Father Gregory Rogers, actually, I'm pretty sure he was Church of Christ before he converted to Orthodox. And he said that this topic of apostolic succession is what drew him to Orthodoxy. So now Father Gregory Rogers, this is a excellent, and it's like only 40 pages, guys. Come on, there's no excuse for this one. This is an easy one.
This is a book right here I recommend to everyone who is just now beginning their journey. Thinking Orthodox by Father Constantinu. Definitely check out Thinking Orthodox.
Presbyteria.
Oh, yeah. Did he not write it?
She
wrote it.
Yeah.
Now her husband is
her husband's a priest,
correct?
right? Yeah.
Okay, correct. I confused. Yeah. I thought he wrote it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, she has a PhD. She's very educated. I think she has a JD as well. I think that's right. I could be wrong. I think she's a lawyer and a PhD so anyway.
Ignore me.
I
Just
can-
ignore me. But
good.
I
this
can
book
tell
is
you,
phenomenal.
we JDs, you should probably take us with a grain of salt. But she has a really good translation of, I think it was, I forgot which Saint Andrew it was that did the commentary on John's Apocalypse. Saint Andrew of Crete. I don't know. I have it in the other room, but that's like the definitive Orthodox understanding of the Book of Revelation, and it might be, because I'm preparing for this Trinity debate. It might be one of the books of the New Testament that has the highest Christology. So if you guys are into apologetics, or at the very least you're trying to like get some things sorted out, I think reading St. Andrew's commentary on the Apocalypse would be very useful for that.
As my other job as an English professor, I hate to ever put out a video when you could have a book, but that book she's also done as lectures before for parishes. Like she comes and does as the retreat speaker or something like that. And there's a two video presentation of the content of that book that you can find on YouTube. And I mean, they're both good, but the first one is outstanding. I think it's fantastic, and it's absolutely worth your time. I mean, it's stuff you're going to get in that book. It's just in the video form for those that might find that more applicable for the time that they have available to do that. I mean, you can watch the second one too. It's a good, but I think that first one's just really good. I think it hits all the things you want to hit from that book. It's really good.
Somebody asked the question here about the Church of Christ. Is it a cult? Does it get the cult label?
I don't think it's
Sometimes
centralized enough, to be honest. I mean, you would know better than I do,
Correct.
Travis, but I think that's a bit of a slur from an outsider perspective. After talking to ex Church of Christ guys and some current Church of Christ guys, I mean, there might be some Church of Christ like church like somewhere in the middle of nowhere that nobody knows about that has cult like behaviors, but
All right.
I wouldn't.
I think
call it that.
it's too decentralized, as you said, to be
There's too much
monolithic
division.
cult. Yeah, there's too much of that. You may have individual congregations where there's a preacher who, for whatever reason, gathers a following. They typically are, well, I guess, a famous guy or something like that, where people gather that you can't go there to learn church growth techniques, because the church growth techniques to have that guy. I mean, he's famous. He wrote books, or he did something, or for whatever reason, he was an athlete or something like that, and people want to go because he's a celebrity of some sort. And you might have people build up around that. And I mean, depending on who it is and what they're doing, you might be able to apply a cultish description to that particular congregation, but not the whole group.
That's a great explanation. Yes. Too divided. There could never be a central figure to unite them, because they're so divided that one church in the same town, the churches will not agree. So you're never going to get that full like cult like mentality among them. But at the same time, they take individualism to such an extreme. I don't think you could ever develop a cult out of it. But they get that label a lot of times because of their exclusivity. That's where that label comes from. Like, they say we're the ones, we're the only ones, and no one else is. And a lot of times they lay the cult label on top of them for that.
Yeah, everybody I ever saw that kind of became somebody famous, you would have just as many people go the other direction. So
Church famous is a thing in the churches of Christ. There are people who chase the label of being church famous. Um, you'll see them a lot of times frequenting the lectureships throughout the country. They're doing gospel meetings all the time. there's some, there was one that I know he was at his home congregation maybe 6 months out of the year. The rest of the time he was traveling and doing other stuff. But yeah, there is church famous. And they can get into some weird culty things with those people, like Father said. They can kind of build their own kind of cult following behind them.
Did I see somebody ask about general history of Orthodoxy? Like, is the Orthodox Church, Callisto Ware's book, the go-to? Was that one I saw?
I think that's a really good one for just like an overview of the history and
I
also
do,
like the
yeah.
structure of authorities. Like I know he's had some criticism for like saying weird things later on in his life, but that book is not controversial. That book is just basics.
Yeah.
There's
it's a good book.
too mystical.
I mean, it is not going to go into anything in depth or anything like that. It's a big overview, but it's a good overview, and it gives you the thing. If you get one of the older ones, I've only read like the edition that was published in the 60s or 70s or something like that. I haven't read. I think it's been updated, and I don't know if he added to the history, but we ended, with the struggle in the Soviet Union, historically speaking. So obviously we've got a couple of decades past that where things are a little different, but really overall, I think it's a really good book. It's one I usually guide people to if it's available, just if they're just kind of want a general idea of things.
Yeah, I think what was really important for me in that book was establishing the hierarchy of authorities. Like, how do we what's the difference between a pan-Orthodox council and a council that's received as ecumenical with ecumenical status? How do we look at the liturgy? Like, these are things you have to believe, but is every single prayer book that you buy at an Orthodox church infallible theological treatise? That setting up that hierarchy of authorities I thought was really important early on. But I did a little bit more digging into Father Gregory Rogers, and he was indeed Church of Christ, and it was this issue and this essay, the work that he has memorialized in this essay, that brought him to Holy Orthodoxy. So it's like an interesting little tidbit there for the audience.
Yeah, I've met a few other people that were from the Churches of Christ who have become clergy in Orthodoxy. Not all of them were preachers before they were just, maybe grew up as kids and then converted later or whatever. But there are a few of us. We had at our parish for a while. We had like a little former COC contingent. I mean, like our choir, we had like 5 people. They loved us in the choir because we could sing. Right? I mean, we all learned how to sing a cappella, and so we didn't have to rely on the piano, or an organ. We weren't all good, but we could sing. I mean, so
confident at the
And
very
you are
least, right?
And if you are a male, you are expected to learn how to sing. If you have even the slightest bit of talent, they will have you in front of the whole church leading singing.
Oh, I'm confident that growing up in the Church of Christ is the reason that I don't worry about getting in front of audiences. I don't have a fear of public speaking because I don't remember not being up in front of people, leading singing, shaped and, it's a 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 time. I got it, leading singing or saying a prayer, or when you're old enough, reading the scripture or whatever. I've always been up in front of people because that's the culture that it did. So, although no shape notes in Orthodoxy, unless you're doing Byzantine notation, but it's a different shape note, so it doesn't help.
DNH is asking me. I'm going to do my best Jesse Lee Peterson voice, guys, but this is not my area of expertise. Do y'all cry about Mary on Fridays? No. No, we don't. But I think you know that. DNH. There's another question said, hold up.
Hey, I can do 4/4 time too, or 2/4. I got them. We're good. always wondered, like, if there was a 1/4 time, would you just be? Yeah, I don't know.
Yes.
So I
How is
was a
that not
pretty
just 4/4?
shy kid. I was a pretty shy kid, and my preacher, they were taking requests for songs on a Wednesday night, and I said, "Will you lead this song?" And he said, "Why don't you come lead it?" And I was like, we sit on the back pew, and I was like, "You've lost your mind. That's not happening." And in front of the whole church, we argued back and forth for like 10 minutes, just back and forth. No, yes, come up here and lead a song. Until finally I was like, if I will lead this song, if you will leave me alone. And then after that, they had me leading singing pretty much every week. So,
This
it's one of
was
those
the
things.
this was the question. Said, how does the Orthodox view alcohol? Well, it depends. If you have a Russian priest, they're cool with it. If you have no, it's just a joke. It's always moderation, and it depends if we're in a time of feasting or a time of fasting. Our life is attuned to the liturgical calendar, and yeah, drunkenness obviously we see as a sin, but this is also something that the Lord gave us to enjoy. Like, there was a passage, I think in like Deuteronomy or something. I'm kind of blanking on it now, but it literally says, I think it was during the Passover, Father, maybe you remember, where God instructs the Israelites to spend their money on strong drink, and it's really only
There's
one.
I can't remember.
reason
Maybe it's
for
in
that.
the Proverbs or one of the prophets. I don't remember, where it talks about that God has provided this for you for your enjoyment and stuff like that. I think it's like everything, really. Uh, there are some foods I shouldn't eat, and if I'm predisposed to alcoholism, for example, or if I am, I'm not. But if I were an alcoholic, I just said I'm not. That's the first sign you are, right? An alcoholic. Okay, I'm not. But if this is a problem for you, then fine. You receive communion, then stay away from it. You don't have to do more. That's fine. Um, but there are some foods I shouldn't eat. My body doesn't react well to them. I should stay away from those. Other than that, I shouldn't overeat, right? I shouldn't do too much of any kind of food. And I think that we can often just consider alcohol the same way. If it's something that's a moderated, as Alex said, moderated, it's used appropriately and all that, we do consider it a feasting food. And so whenever you, there you go. Yeah. Whenever you put in, we're doing fasting times, it's almost always wine is one of the things that we don't eat during that fasting period. So we may not eat meat and olive oil and wine, things like that. So
That's Travis's favorite verse now.
Well, there you go. See, if you'd have been raised in the Church of Christ, you'd knew where that verse was, Alex.
You got me. Fair enough. We weren't doing apologetics rap battles and Pentecostalism. It was, it's just a speaking in tongues contest usually. Suzuki
Now, Father,
Hayabusa Shirabarahanda.
yeah. Now, Father, from your side of the Churches of Christ, did they raise y'all like miniature soldiers as well, like Acts 2:38, Mark 16:16, 1 Peter 3:21? You had the gambit ready to throw at a Baptist anytime that conversation came up.
I guess yeah, pretty much. You had the whole routine you learned in class. As soon as you're old enough to start memorizing that kind of stuff, you started learning, hear, believe, confess, repent, be baptized, the acts of worship, all those things. You could be able to spit those out and know what they were. And yeah.
Rhythm Church.
Well, what
cool
is something
dude.
that you've oh, go ahead.
This guy's not a fan of Rhythm Church. That is kind of a odd name for a church, right? I mean, even growing up in the Pentecost. Like, why not Bethesda, Bethel, Philadelphia? It's just a biblical name, like Rhythm Church.
Well, what is
But yeah,
something that
sorry, you
through
were saying,
through your
Travis.
I said, what is something through your kind of discussions with Aaron and preparing for those debates with Aaron? What was something about the Churches of Christ that kind of surprised you?
It's a good question. So much was so shocking,
Yeah,
But
I mean, there were from our perspective, I guess,
I think it was the voting system where I get, like, even in a lot of Pentecostal churches, it'll just kind of be like a per family majority vote on some issues, and they vote on a board. But like having children, and like I get it's like maybe not a widespread practice, but enough for it to be a thing, that these situations, that not only from you, from other ex Church of Christ people saying like, yep, I remember there was a guy, he had like 7 kids, they were all under 15, he had them all baptized just so that he could have 7 more votes at the next general men's meeting or something. So I think that was pretty shocking. Otherwise, it seems like they're another this logical result of, if you're going to take the Protestant methodology to its conclusion, right? If you're going to be sola scriptura and be like, look, honestly, I just don't see this icon stuff in the Bible. I don't see this liturgy stuff in the Bible. I don't see this intercession stuff in the Bible. I'm just going to go make my own church. The church must have fallen away somewhere, or they lost their way. I'm just going to start my own thing. So what I do like about the Churches of Christ is that they do prioritize that. That also surprised me too, like on the good end. I was surprised that they prioritized like all the right things that primed them for orthodoxy. Like, they want to be that first century church. They want to cut out all of the extra stuff. They want to go back to, really, how did the apostles worship? Like, what did they do? What did they teach? And I think that kind of zeal for like the early church is a very good positive. That also took me by surprise. So it's like I was very happy to have that debate with Aaron early on. I didn't really know who he was, and it turns out he's like one of your top guys. So in that case, I'm like glad that I met you through like Father Jonathan at the Transfigured Life, and through Justin Travis, because I think your prep for that debate was invaluable. It was very, very useful to me. So yeah, a lot of good things in the Church of Christ, the Churches of Christ, but if they love the Bible so much, if only they could read it in the proper way. That's the only thing. But I love Church of Christ people. They're so wholesome and kind, and at least in my interactions with them, it's been like nothing but a really good sense of humor, and the fruits of the Spirit, and a love for the Scriptures.
the one thing I regret from the takeaway with y'all's debate was that Aaron focused so much on the children part rather than also the unqualified men part, because we had
Yeah.
men in every church that had no elders.
Yeah, that
There were
means
men
every
who would,
single one of them is unqualified, and they're
right.
the ones that are making the decisions for that church.
But even among the unqualified, there were even situations like we had. This is every church that didn't have elders. There would be somebody who showed up only on the Sunday that they had men's meetings so that they could vote.
Yeah, and then it's like,
And it's
dude,
like
who are
this guy's
you?
not
Why are you
qualified in
here?
any sense. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not part of us. We don't know you.
There was I remember the congregation I grew up in, they had elders, and then one of the elders passed away, which left there being no elders. And they had a vote, and it was a really controversial vote. They pretty much blew up the church with it. But the thing that I remember as a kid that was so striking is it was on a Sunday night, and a member walked in to come to the vote. And in 16 years, my whole life, okay, I don't know how long before that, he had never stepped foot in the church building on a Sunday night. That was
Wow.
the first time he had ever been there on a Sunday night. And I remember thinking, this is weird. Why is he here? And then, of course, they blew the church up with a vote. But why would he be a part of this vote? He never even comes to church,
Dude, you don't even go here. Like,
like I don't know you,
yeah.
We have those people at church too, though. I mean,
well, we had a thing
come on,
recently.
dude.
We had a parish meeting, and I was like, who are these people? Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, on the good end of that same struggle is here last year. About, it was a little later than this because Pascha, I think, was a little later last year, but it was after Pascha, but not too long, maybe 2 or 3 months after. And I'm walking after the liturgy. We finish all the stuff we do, and I leave the altar and I'm walking over toward the church hall, and there's a couple sitting on the bench out there. And I said, "Oh, hey, it's good. I'm Father Juvenale. Have we met?" And they said, "Yeah, we were baptized at Pascha." Now, remember, I'm not the only priest there, so I'm not the one that actually baptized them. But it's kind of like there's so many people that are coming in. It's hard to keep track of everybody. So
glory to God.
We have people come in all the time that you just don't know. And by the way, at that liturgy, I was up getting things ready for the liturgy. They were out doing the baptisms, and I was in the altar. I wasn't out there when that was all going on. So
doing
anyway,
the
I'm making
work.
excuses of why I didn't know their names, but anyway, but yeah, they'll vote too though. So, and I don't coming in.
Yeah, somebody had asked earlier if I had heard from anybody from Memphis. Not really. Not from anyone from the school at all. There are a few graduates, people I went to school with. There's been a handful, but that was kind of probably the most strange thing for me. The strangest thing for me is if you genuinely believe that I'm now going to hell, right? And we spent 2 years together, why would you not reach out if you genuinely thought that? That was one of the shocking things to me because I thought back to that passage we were taught in school. You who are spiritual, restore such a one. And it's like, well, if you believe that I have left the faith, if you're not the spiritual ones, who is, right?
Yeah, I think we see that. I think if these things were happening 40 or 50 years ago, we would probably have a different response from our former classmates and our teachers there at the schools. But we're hardly the only people in our graduating classes from the schools that have left the Church of Christ. They may have gone somewhere else or gone to nowhere or whatever. But even my dad, who graduated in 1973, he had a picture that he kept on his desk of his graduating class. And whenever one of them would leave the ministry, he would put a little tiny piece of tape over them. So he would know who was still preaching and who wasn't. And by the time he died, and he died young, but by the time he died, the majority of people in his class were no longer in ministry. And many of them had left the Church of Christ for various things. So I think that, and that was, 50 years ago, and I think they did reach out to each other more back then. But I think it's so common now that I think that's why my family didn't react so devastating, about it happening. I'm not the first one to leave Church of Christ. I mean, I'm the first one that was a preacher that left, but I'm not the first one total leave. And I mean, we have other people that end up in other situations that seem much worse than this. That I think it's the culture is so much. Our broader culture is so much more ungodly that I think that this doesn't seem like it's as big a deal as it was 50 years ago.
And it kind of goes back to something you just said. I do feel like the culture within the churches of Christ is changing dramatically from the time, even when I was a child. I brought this up in one of my videos that when I was a kid, if you brought a visitor, like a friend, to church, they did not take communion. You told them, they would be from the pulpit. You told them before you went to church, like, you're not a member of the church, you can't have communion. Like, that was standard across the board when I was a kid. Nowadays, like, whoever shows up, they just pass them the plate and everybody takes it and goes on about their day. And I even had one of my elders, because I said, this is when I was first really getting into Orthodoxy. And I was like, I just don't think this is right. Like, there's something very dangerous about giving people the communion that aren't even, Christians. This is our definition. And the response was, well, that's everyone's personal decision. It's just crackers and juice after all. And I was just like, that's it. I can't do this. I can't do this. What are we doing?
Yeah, somebody asked me if I have any plans to interview Father Turbo. I do not have any plans, but I would love to interview Father Turbo. If you know Father Turbo, tell him. Maybe I should message him on like X or something. Yeah, I think Father Turbo is excellent.
Father, did you ever experience that kind of idea when you were a kid that communion wasn't to be given to people that you brought to church with you?
Oh yeah, ours was always you had to be a baptized member of the Church of Christ to receive communion. Yeah. I mean, if you were a kid, you hadn't been baptized yet, you don't get that. Even if it's just cracker and juice. After all, you still don't get any of it, even though it's just a cracker and juice. Although it was not unheard of as a preacher's kid, it was not unheard of for unbaptized kids when you were cleaning up the trays and there were leftovers. If the leftovers, because I'm not going to lie, the matzah cracker, if it was very big, they'd put it back in the box for next week, right? But if it was pretty small, like it was kind of getting to, you might get to finish that off. I mean, they would give it to you. It wasn't like you were up there by yourself. They'd give, hey, you can have that. Or, hey, here's 3 little thimbles of grape juice. You can go ahead and knock those back, kid, or something like that. So because it wasn't actually happening during the service, it was fair game at that point. So, but other than that, no, I mean, that was always it. Although I also don't know that I ever remember seeing anyone police that. I mean, it was understood this is only for Church of Christ members to partake. But if when the tray went by, you took some, I've never seen anybody tackle anyone to take it away from them or anything like that. I mean, they just let you have it, and you just think, I can't believe he did that, or whatever. But it was not supposed to happen.
Looking back, that is one of the things I find strange. Is we had this like hardcore guardianship of communion, but at the same time we held the Zwinglian view that it just represents. And so you have representative communion, but you can't have it.
Yeah, it's weird, no doubt.
The kids at our church would be taking shots of the leftover Welch's.
They might get too much of a sugar rush. You got to be careful with the sugar, cavities and such.
Tarry too long at the Welch's.
It's a little prepackaged. These guys in the chat dogging on Jay a little bit here. Look, I don't want to make the stream about him, but like you guys got to learn to read between the lines. Like all the stuff about Ruslan is like the reason why he's taunting him so much is because he knows Ruslan won't debate, right? So he's just making a point that no matter what he says, Ruslan is not going to subject his views to scrutiny, right? Yeah, it's not crashing out. It's very calculated. Like Jay is not a stupid person. Like he's my friend and he's a very smart person. Like he does these things for a reason. Would I do these things the same way he does? No, I would not. But Jay is Jay and Alex is Alex. So Jay is based. I don't care. He calls people out. Throwaway account, no too. I mean, here's the thing is that if you're going to posture yourself as an enemy to Christ's church, at some point you have to be realistic with yourself and realize maybe I'll get some pushback from somebody. Maybe I'll get some harsh pushback from somebody, right? You kind of expose yourself to this possibility. And that doesn't excuse us from, our words being seasoned with salt and for building up. But, you see in the Holy Fathers and in the sacred scriptures that sometimes invective is called for and appropriate. That said, I am not a saint, not even close. So, Saint Jerome is going to call Vigilantius or Helvidius names. I'm not Saint Jerome. So I have my own spiritual father to answer to. Jay has his own spiritual father to answer to. But yeah. Father, what is your take on invective in polemics and online
I don't know.
apologetics?
You
Should
know,
be
I think
extremely limited, but
when I was younger, I would be much more prone to argue and debate stuff. The older I get, the more I realize I don't know that much anyway. So I should pray more and stop trying to debate people that, you know, I may know more than them, but it's still not very much. And I need to learn a lot more and grow a lot more. And the other thing is if you're going to have a one-off, you know, debate with someone, or even if it's just a conversation, ad hoc conversation, you can do that and it's fine. But most of the time, these things nowadays, because of technology, these are going to be a long-term engagement of some sort, whether it's trolling each other on X or having multiple debates on. And as I'm not going to lie, I don't have time for that stuff, you know, and I just do my best to avoid it. And so it's my general practice, and this is my I'm not saying anyone else should have to do this. I'm saying this is what I do. Is when people want to argue about stuff, I just, you know what, there is nothing out there that people want to argue with me about that hasn't already been argued multiple times.
Nothing new under the sun.
Why do I need to do this again? Go read the book. You know, I mean, it's already there, you know, and go watch the video. It's already been done. Go search for it in YouTube. You'll find you guys talking about it, and that's fine. You know, if you guys have debates. That's what I'm happy for that. I'm glad there's someone that does. You know, I'm not going to make a judgment call on any individual person one way or the other here, but I will tell you this, that many of the people that other persons like to complain about online, we have a lot of people that show up at church, and if you ask them, why did you come here? They'll name that person you don't like. And I don't care which side you're on. They'll tell you that that person you don't like sends people to the church. And God works through all of us that way. And whether I like what someone does or not is kind of irrelevant. If they have the blessing of their priest, spiritual father, to do those things, God bless them. I mean, God will use it to further His kingdom one way or the other. I hope it's good for their salvation too. I hope it's good for all of our salvation. I personally, I'm just, maybe it's laziness, I don't know, but I'm just not, I don't have the time to put into those continual, you know, fights. But sometimes you got to call things what they are. So
there's I like what you said towards the end there, Father. Well, I liked everything you said, but towards the end there was something especially that I liked, that you said, hopefully it's for the salvation of those listening, but also for the people participating in it. And that we have like our little parish Bible study. We were doing 1 Corinthians 8 and 9. And towards the end of 9, that's where St. Paul starts using the language of like the athlete and running the race. And he closes out that section. He says something like, shoot, what was it? It was something like, and I too want to like run the race, lest I be disqualified myself. It's like, what a shame that it would be if, you know, you're leading all these people to Christ and to, you know, in the eschaton, in the New Jerusalem, the new heavens and the new earth. They're all there, and you, the one who directed them there, you don't end up there. Like, what a shame that would be, right? So, like, yeah, that's important, I think, to look out for if you're going to engage in the online debate and apologetics. It is a form of combat. Like, let's be real and honest here. Like, everybody's trying to make their point and everybody's trying to defend their view because they think they're right. And I was thinking about this recently, and in Pope St. Leo's letters, he talks about soldiers and like the mandatory military service. And even though they may do like a justified unaliving in wartime, or even just a normal person who does justified unaliving, like self-defense or defense of others or something, even if it's a justified unaliving, that still leaves like a taint and an injury on your heart and on your soul. And he says that it's still something that you need to confess. And I think, granted to a much lesser degree, because we're using words in our combat, there can still be some like injury to your heart, you know, even if you're fighting for the church, because it is combat.
Right. Well, I think ultimately the key to it all is, regardless of what your role is in serving the church, whether it's having debates or just serving as a priest or being a pious layman or whatever your your role is it's all built on humility. And if you don't have the humility, then it really doesn't matter. And I think that's what Paul's talking about, right? Don't want to follow at the end. Well,
Yeah.
you can look and say, oh, I've done all these things and look how good I've done. That's a problem. If you're doing it, looking at you, I mean, not that you don't recognize reality. I mean, you can come in and say, I'm a better debater than you, and I'm stronger at this than you. That may be just stating a fact. If you're doing it like saying, yeah, that's right, I'm a better debater than you, that's a problem.
You're like rolling up to the pearly gates with a long resume,
right,
and you're like, I'm getting in today, right?
Yeah. That's
the wrong attitude.
Humility. If you have humility, I think that there's lots of struggles you may have, and as long as you have those struggles but you're humble about it, I think that it's all right, or you'll turn out all right. Whereas I don't care what your skill level is and how much you've overcome. If it makes you prideful, you're going to be in danger. And so it's all about humility. So I think there are probably some people who have the gift of doing these debates and so forth that are able to stay humble. God bless them. You should do that. But if that's a struggle that you can't win, then don't get in that arena.
And the Churches of Christ, we had a debate culture. My daughter was laughing. I was talking to a buddy of mine. We graduated from preaching school together, and he called me, and he was over the speakerphone. We were going down the road, and I had made a joke about me argue never, like, we would never do such a thing. And he goes, "Do you remember that night we stayed up debating over which company made the best steak sauce?" And we debated, like, three of us, like, debated for like 2 hours on which steak sauce was the best and why. And my daughter was like, "What?" And I was like, "This is a part of what it was to be at Memphis. Like, we debated everything all the time." And I remember there was one student. He came back to the housing we had there, and he was bragging and laughing. And I was a second year, he was a first year. I remember being in my room and hearing him brag about making this guy cry at Lifeway Christian Bookstore because they were having a debate. And he said, "Yeah," and the guy cried. And I remember walking out of my room, and I was like, "Well, good job." Like, what did you just accomplish other than you just destroyed this guy's confidence and you made him feel like he was garbage? Yeah, you destroyed him. Yeah, you won, but what did you accomplish? Like, congratulations.
Well, it's like he won the battle, but maybe lost the war, right?
Right.
I saw a question a while ago about trying to introduce things from Orthodoxy into the Church of Christ, maybe clandestinely or something like that. I honestly, from my perspective, I have no possible way to introduce things to the Church of Christ. It's been 20 years since I've been there. I have family members, but they know who I am and where I am and so forth. I think I would much more prefer, even as a new convert, I would prefer to take the Saint Seraphim of Sarah approach, and you become holy and 1,000 around you will be saved, and I think you work on your own holiness, you work at your church, whatever your role is, and God guides people where he wants them, and he'll guide them to those places as long as you're open and ready for them. I think it may be good to be able to, if you have people that can speak their language, so when they show up, you have Travis that can communicate to them in a way that maybe someone else couldn't. And then if you don't have someone that's more recent, someone further back like me, or maybe somebody like Alex that has interacted with them some, or ultimately you end up with who you got. But if you have somebody that can speak their language a little bit, that might help ease it when they're there. But I don't know. I don't know that there's a way to. The closest I ever came to doing something, sneaky, and I tried not to do that, honestly, because I walked that tightrope. And I tried to be honest to everybody and fair to everybody as much as I could. I did one time in a sermon refer to as the Scripture says, and it was from the Wisdom of Sirach. And so that's my one sneaky thing I ever did in the Church of Christ. Refer to something that they wouldn't have recognized as a scriptural book. And so that's it, though. But that would be my take on it.
Yeah, Father, I think you're totally right and onto something there. That there's like, I think especially for young guys, there's so much zeal and well intentioned. I assume at least like 99% of the time, it's just they found a pearl of great price. They found the treasure in the field. They want to tell everybody about it. But there's like a wisdom that comes with like appropriateness there. Like you're like debating your parents, probably not a good idea. That's when like you'll probably the most persuasive thing you can do is to be an obedient and like humble son or daughter, and show them the fruits of this worldview that you're learning, the ancient worldview of the apostles. And then they're like, you're with the boys, you're having some hot dogs, and like maybe that's the time to actually be a little bit more aggressive about it, with respect. But you have to remember that like these are people you're probably going to see frequently, and you want to end each interaction set up for the next one. You never want to burn a bridge.
Well, I believe we are getting pretty close to the end of our stream here. I believe Father Juvenile needs to leave here just a little bit.
I'm old, man. Yeah.
Any final words, Father?
No, it's a blessing. I thank you for being here. Like I say, I'm glad that we got in contact with each other, because it's you know we live in different states, and we came from different. I don't know. We were probably closer to each other than we want to admit in the Church of Christ, but maybe not quite exactly the same spot. But it's nice to have somebody that speaks the language I used to speak a lot, and that I still have a little nostalgia for and appreciation for. And I really appreciated the way that you presented that your story on those earlier videos, and that's I think it's a good way. I think that people can learn at least why you did it, and it may prompt them to go try to prove you wrong, and then we'll welcome them next year.
I appreciate that, Father. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's a blessing. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to make your acquaintance too. I haven't spoken to you before the stream. But Travis, if you don't mind, if I'd briefly plug my friend Brett's YouTube channel called The Woolen Sword. He just does like tutorials on how to put together like prayer ropes and like 33 knot. I presume he's going to make some bigger ones, but he sent me one, and this is like pretty cool. It's like he doesn't even sell them. He just kind of like makes them for free and just wants to teach other people how to make them themselves. So you can like make some for your parish. But like this is all an olive wood bead from an olive tree in Jerusalem. So he does some pretty cool stuff out there too. And I think it's a great way to fundraise for your local parish. And along with the bake sales of the cabbage rolls, from the Romanian ladies on the weekends, you can throw in a few prayer ropes there too. Otherwise, I have a debate on April 30th on Modern Day Debates, discussing Unitarianism and Trinitarianism with Metaphysics Mike. So if you guys want to tune into that, I think hopefully I plan on it being edifying and a good expose on the weaknesses in the Unitarian view.
Well, I'm going to give a shout out to Nicholas in Korea real quick, because I was watching his stream, and it is where I learned about the Mer streaming icon in Hawaii. And my Mer from the Mer streaming icon in Hawaii made its way uh, to my home this week. So that was wonderful. I found out about it there and was able to have some delivered. So be sure to check that out. You can just plug your address in and they will send you some. So that's incredible. That's something in the Churches of Christ not very familiar with. We were not taught. That's a whole nother segment on cessation and all that stuff.
Yeah,
We won't get into
I'm
that
just
too much.
waiting. I'm waiting for him to find those pictures of Alexander a Sphere. That's what I want to see. Yeah, then that makes that oil make a whole lot more sense.
For sure. For sure. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in to our first live stream ever. Thank you, Alex, for being here. Be sure to watch
Yeah, my
that
pleasure.
debate with. Be sure to watch that debate with Alex coming up. It's going to be, I think it's going to be great, and I know Alex is going to represent orthodoxy to in a wonderful way.
Lord willing.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. God bless.